Welcome to Tech Talk Podcasts by CERT's IT Service Solutions. In part 2 of Is BAU Dead in Tech and IT, Jon and Cristan discuss the balance between transformation and BAU, including the topics military values in IT, clear and ambiguous communications, and chaos engineering. Let's dive into part 2.
So just a bit more maybe on how we create this environment, not just sort of psychologically safe, but the kind of, how you can learn and fail is, I say learn fast rather than fail fast. But is there anything, specifically with your armed forces background that kind of plays to that? Because if I can just do a quick example on the psychological safety, I read somewhere that you get two surgeons next to each other, and the junior surgeon has to hold the knife, as it were. Apologies, anyone, if this is making you feel queasy. And that's because the senior surgeon is much more likely to interrupt. Whereas if the senior surgeon's holding the knife, the junior surgeon might not say something, even if he... And I'm just, the reason why I mentioned that is because I was thinking, Army, there is a very necessary hierarchy and chain of command and all the rest of it. Yeah. But I'm just imagining that scenario where it's not surgery, it's something else. Because, you were what's called a non-commissioned officer, but you had a leadership role within the Army. So you might have experienced this sort of thing.
I work as a reservist now, and I still do have that sort of approach in the senior level, but in sort of in IT, it'd probably be classed as middle management as well. My most sort of people management actually comes on the physical training side, where I'm responsible for at regimental level, which can be anything from 100 to 200 people for the physical aptitude. But day to day as the section commander role, which will be my traditional role, will be more around teams of 8 that I'd have a responsibility for. I am part of an armed forces community of practice within IT service management, and the last year we have been looking at this subject of military values in IT, which has concluded in me writing the white paper that you alluded to at the start of the conversation. One of the first military values that I actually discuss is transformational versus transactional leadership. Now, those outside of the military, when you ask the question of what is a military leader, they tend to think of your typical army drill sergeant, somebody...
What they've seen on the telly.
Yeah, shouty shout, you say I do. That's needed in some instances, but that's not my experience. You have a lot of transformational leaders, and have you heard of sort of Daniel Goleman's leadership styles, and it goes from sort of affirmative to directive, and there's 6 different leadership styles, and you can think of when you tend to do these as sort of workshops, you'll go away and you'll go and look at your Steve Jobs and place him where you think he is, and Gandhi, and each one of them holds their own purpose. You have something called situational leadership, where transactional leadership in the military, you may be on a battlefield, you may be doing surgery as your example, and it needs to be more directive. It needs to be like, this is how you're doing it, and you need to do it in that way. Militaries can probably in some cases be the worst case scenario in a kinesthetic situation. It quite literally could be life or death. That's something that I actually bring as a ad lib. Is I do sometimes use that in an IT sense when we're dealing with major incidents, and I say, nope, nobody's going to die. Everybody is like panicking that there's this significant incident. It's not like, let's calm down, let's just be pragmatic, let's iron out the situation, see what it is.
I think in your paper, do you refer to that as kind of the power of really clear communications, comms?
Yeah, clear unambiguous communication is another factor of that. And you
just so you know, Cristan, I've done a little bit of homework.
But
it's really well put. I mean, that is, you don't want to be turning around and saying, sorry, Cristan, was that the yellow one or the red one I was meant to do whatever to? Yeah.
Yeah, and the clear and unambiguous communication fits. So in all work, I think you could have that conversation just in business in general, not just
Yeah.
IT. But it's very pertinent to me because my biggest curve in my learning and development all the time is the technical side of the work that I can do. I sometimes describe myself. I probably can't get away with describing it as much as I used to when I joined the industry. But I used to describe myself as a non-techie in a techie world. Especially in a major incident scenario, I can have the conversations with the technically gifted people, engineers through and through, and they code every day of their lives. And I can take that information and pass it over to senior leadership and dissect it how it needs to be and have that conversation. I'm very good at that. But what I've always tried to work on is building up that technical aptitude to make it easier for me to understand and digest that and have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it's very paramount in that clear and unambiguous communication. With the leadership style, to the original point, is you have that transactional side, but you have the transformational side as well. A fair few years ago, one of the British Army's big slogans was fail, learn, win. That whole concept, especially in training environments, they want you to not, they'll put you in a situation where they know you don't necessarily have all the information, but they want you to experiment. They want you to think about stuff. They want you to try concepts and
Yeah.
understand why it didn't work in the first instance.
Yeah.
We go back to that feedback loop again. You'll then get given that feedback loop. You'll learn from that. You'll understand the principles, the concepts of whatever you're doing in that military capacity. You'll go away and implement it with your newfound learnings, and you'll then win ultimately. And then that allows you that when you are in a situation where it has to be more directive and it is more transactional, you've already took them learnings, you've already failed in a situation where you were able to fail. Yeah, that's sort of where you are. The best example I've seen of this in modern technology is the concept of chaos engineering. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Chaos engineering was actually adopted by Netflix. Netflix scaled so fast, which is very relevant to the topic of conversation that we had today,
Yeah.
is that they had challenges with capacities. The servers couldn't keep up with the amount of distribution they needed to and the amount of customers they had. So some engineers within Netflix said, well, actually, instead of waiting for these incidents to occur and dealing with them and learning from them, why don't we set up the environments in which we can create our own chaos? And Chaos Monkey was formed and coined, and then chaos engineering came off the back of that. So they would do proactive incident management, where they would purposely put chaos into their systems, break their environments, not in such a way where it's going to impact the end user, and then learn from them to say, okay, well, if I've done X, it's caused Y, so this is what I now need to put into my featured list to make sure that that doesn't happen in a real scenario. I've done that in organizations before. In Netflix world, they were so strong and passionate about it that they did theirs in the live environment. I've never got to a situation where somebody, and it's interesting from a CTO perspective, I've never got anybody at the SLT level to be like, yeah, we'd be willing to do that. But I have done it in aligned dev and testing environments where we've been able to break that. What I've expanded on that is it's a very engineer focused thing. What I would encourage people to do, if anyone's listening and they do like, oh yeah, we do chaos engineering, branch that out, involve your service management team. So don't just test the engineering factors of it and the technical bits of your systems. Test your support processes. So if you're breaking the system, do that in the confines of the major incident process. Test your incident process, see if it's working well, because if it's not working well, you can rectify that. So when you do have a real life major incident, that you're not going, well, who do I need to communicate with? Who needs to run this major incident? What communications need to get sent out? Do I involve SLT? Do I not? Am I telling my customer base? That'll be the BAU, you'll know what needs to happen then, because you've already tested that hypothesis out in a non-real life situation.
It's fantastic, and what I love about this is I'm always learning, and the chaos engineering I've written down, that's definitely going to be something I'm going to be looking into. Cool. Well, look, I want to ask you, I'm itching to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just from everything you've said, and a bit of your background. So you mentioned cognitive load. You also mentioned that you're an army PT guy, which means I'm pretty certain that of all of our guests, you could probably do the most pull-ups. That's just a guess, Cristan.
I don't know if you've had previous, but I could do good on the press up competition. Pull-ups I'm probably about average, but yeah.
Well, I don't want to disrespect any of the previous guests, but if it goes on the host's ability, if you can do more than one, you're ahead of me, despite all of my efforts. So where I was trying to get to is, I mean, for me, last 4 months I've taken up boxing. Just another hobby of my hundreds of hobbies that I've had, but it's really drawn me in. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I think there's a link between cognitive load, mental health, and exercise. I mean, sorry, that's hardly a revelation of the century, but where I wanted to come into is your experience, because you obviously, there's real obvious values to being fit if you're in the armed forces. Yeah, there's a kind of real sort of direct consequence of not being fit in certain situations, but there must be this huge wider benefit of being fit in any case, and everything that comes with it. And I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity in the technology industry, because there is a cliched view of the engineer who's, I've been there, my weight has changed and my mental health has changed over the years, etc. And I just think there's a huge value in this, but it's sort of, you maybe have a running club or gym clubs and all the rest of it, but you don't hear it talked about specifically in the context of what we do. And I'm trying to get back to this, with change coming through thick and fast, and everyone trying to get on with that. If you don't look after yourself physically, anyway, that's kind of what I'm trying to tee up, Cristan. What's your take on that?
So I think I'm hugely aligned to your thought process on that. I'm definitely an advocate of it. I'm a qualified personal trainer. Outside of this, I do sort of outdoor fitness classes. I think the challenge with this is it's too far of a reach to some of the people that we're speaking to. So people. And this is probably a bit of a generalization, but it is fairly accurate. Is the typical IT person doesn't always have sort of fitness as the secondary thing that they focus on. I don't think that you need to be telling people that you need to go and take up boxing or go on running for an hour, or you need to be in the gym before you start work, or we're going to implement a run club at work and everybody needs to join. Like, that's too far of a level. But what we should be focusing on is go and get some fresh air. Make sure you're going outside of your house every day. Make sure you're getting some steps in. Make sure you're hydrating. Make sure that you're not going from back to back meetings. So in response to your question, there absolutely is a correlation to it. I think to improve it, it's a much more lower level. Like telling people to step away from the worst one is screen time for me. We fail ourselves in not managing meetings and not managing our calendars correctly, and jumping from post to post. Not eating at our desk is one of the worst one. Another thing that I've done as well, which is benefited, is there's no reason in today's age that your one-to-ones need to be as we are now at a screen. Why don't you have a Teams meeting that is audio based and tell your team member, if it's safe to do so, to go and do your 30-minute one-to-one where you're outside walking? There might be some stages sometime, obviously, where you're doing an appraisal, or there's something that you have to go through on a screen. But if it's just a general catch up to see how how the person in your team is performing, or if there's any blockers, or if they're not having a good time or something, Tell them to go out and walk. Go and walk with them for 30 minutes whilst you're on the phone to them. The feedback that I've had for that, people absolutely love doing that. And people might not want to go out of the house, but people might sit on the couch instead of being at the screen, and it just removes them away from that screen for 30 or 40 minutes.
Or Cristan, if the sun ever comes out.
Well, that's it. I'm not doing it so much at the moment because I'm in Manchester and it's very rainy.
I'm in Yorkshire as well, but I do think a bit of daylight, even actually, let's be honest, even when it's cold, a bit of daylight, a bit of fresh air makes all the difference. I think that goes back a little bit to, you remember the Phoenix Project, the 4 categories. Well, I think the truth is that there's a lot more than 4 categories going on in people's lives. And we probably need to add, something about, personal space and mental health and all those sorts of things. And then we can start to categorize family, purpose, all these sorts of things. And then maybe we've got a more realistic thing to categorize against.
It comes to cognitive load again, and the cognitive load, people need to remember that it's not just work cognitive load. When I was learning about this initially, it was somebody within the cognitive load space, but the way that they explained it is that they got people together and did a little bit of an experiment where they had a bucket, stones and sand, and each stone had a different thing on it, which was like,
I think it might have been Covey.
Covey,
isn't it?
It might be, And obviously the thing was that if you put the sand in first, which was your sort of your administrative work, your non big tasks, and then put the stones on top, you'd always go above that bucket. But then if you put the stones in and you put your primary focuses on, and you managed and prioritized the big things first, and then did the lower level tasks in between, it would make it so that level was lower. And that was the concept, that the cognitive load and the management and prioritization of your workload, and not forgetting the big things in terms of family, fitness, health. They need to be in the bucket first before you even consider the sand and the other tasks.
It's really interesting, Cristan, because I think I've spent, possibly wasted, a good few years in the sort of early noughties looking at productivity. And one of the things, I still do it, is I try and work on something called zero inbox at work. Nowhere else. I can't manage it anywhere else. But actually, I've just started reading a book, and I'm going to get the title wrong, but it's basically that it's the number of weeks that occur within the average lifespan. And the author's view on that is actually, don't do zero inbox. You need to work on getting less email coming to you in the first place. So using your Covian example would be, actually, maybe the objective isn't to perfectly pack the glass. It's actually to perfectly pack it, but still have half available for other things, or actually reject quite a lot of the stones. There's a really strong category there for when you're in a position where you're receiving lots and lots of feeds from lots of different people. But that's not just limited to management roles, is it? I mean, everyone can exert leadership to us, So I think that's the other thing I would say for folk. Try and look at that. Where is it coming from? Sometimes when I'm doing zero inbox, I will look at the emails and say, well, actually, 4 of these could have been directed somewhere else, so rather than just do you need to speak to such and such as the reply, I'm also thinking, how do I stop that kind of email coming again? On your cognitive load, and you talked about the back-to-back meetings. Personally, I've had meetings that have been scheduled for every 30 minutes, and I read somewhere that it takes at least 5-10 minutes to just context switch. So when I get those days, and I still get them, I kind of don't write off the day, but I kind of mentally prepare myself for, this is going to be a kind of a rapid fire day. So apologies, I didn't mean to use that as the analogy, but you know what I mean? Kind of, it's going to be one of those days, but other days I will try and book or not book anything. So it's more of I'm going to create some content.
I have them days. The current organization I'm with is really good at, you can, especially on Microsoft stuff, I assume that you can do it on Google Suite as well. You can force your meetings to stop 5 minutes, 10 minutes before.
Yeah.
That's implemented within our organization. So you have the ability to then step away 5 minutes before and move yourself from the screen. And okay, as you said, the science probably sometimes backs that you might need some more time to move yourself away from it. I have noticed that within myself, I want to do that conversational side and the meeting side in the mornings, and then do the work in the afternoons. And I found that's my best way of being productive. And I would encourage people to experiment in their calendar, and if they have the ability to, work out what works best for them. And to avoid meetings going in, I will time box things in my diary. So if I say I know that I need to work on this service management implementation for a tool, I'll put that time boxed in my diary and set
Yes.
myself as busy to do that.
Yeah.
People will still sometimes put meetings in, but that's by the by. But at least you've then be as productive as you can to say, well, I know that I'm going to be doing this at this time. I'm a huge advocate of time boxing.
Yeah, I have I have one of those little dials, that you can turn it up and it'll do a
I've seen them,
countdown. I use that a lot.
Yeah.
So my creative time is in the morning.
Yeah.
It's really pretty much between sort of 6 a.m. to about 9 o'clock. That's when I have my sort of creative thoughts, if that makes sense. And then I get a bit more sort of transactional as the day goes on, or sort of content. But so I kind of balance that, but I also have to look at time zones because I've got some folks around the world.
I have that currently as well.
Exactly. So but it's well worth looking at, isn't it? And it's worth looking at as for the whole team, to work out whether you've created, not deliberately, but just by virtue of meetings and where people are located, some kind of meeting that's crashing everyone's time for doing something else. So Cristan, we've got into productivity. We've done a huge amount on psychological safety and leadership culture, and also the strength, the sort of the natural strength of coming from the UK military background and how that plays, and actually how the leadership in the UK military isn't the cliche that maybe some people think it is by what they see on the telly. And so I just want to say, Cristan, this is a huge privilege to speak to you. I'm definitely going to look at chaos engineering, and I also noticed that you managed to get, I think it was Gandhi, at least was referenced.
I know.
Once
I didn't expect that, to be
in
honest.
terms of his leadership style next to Steve Jobs, which I'm pretty certain they're quite different. But I'm also going to have a look at that. Cristan, I just want to say, it's so cool to describe you as, head of IT service management at Pearson and former combat engineer. I mean, that's got to be the coolest title or intro that I've ever done. Is there anything that you'd like to leave folks with around, adaptability or, your passions? Or I don't like to boil things down to their essence because it can be a little bit of a cliche, but is there something that you'd want to kind of leave folks thinking about?
I'm really happy that it has gone the route that it's gone based on the initial conversation of, is BAU dead? Because my whole focus on this and the future of tech is making sure we continue to have a focus on people, which has been evident in my discussions and the things that I've wanted to bring home and talk about. Is if you focus on them things, it allows you to work to that tech curve and to do sort of industry leading stuff. I think the secret to all of this is the people side of it, is focusing on your people, having psychological safe environments, managing your cognitive load, being situational leaders, and to supplement that, I think military values fit a great deal. The only probably plug and endpoint that I would like to make is you have around 15 to 20,000 people leaving the military each year. All of them are quite ambitious, curious, to look at new line of work. There's a lot of organizations that already have well-established ex-forces programs. But if you're looking at trying to attract top talent, into your organizations, I would explore how you should be making your organizations more forces friendly. It's not because they're entitled and you think that it's a thing to do because they've earned it. It's operationally effective for you to reach into that talent pool. They're going to add benefit to your organizations. So the only thing I would want to plug and leave on is to say, explore how you can attract military talent into your organizations.
Cristan, that's absolutely fantastic, and really, really appreciate it. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that will follow through, particularly on your last point. So on that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone, and I will just sign off here, and see you on the next one.